Welcome to another episode of Keep It Fictional, a book podcast by book lovers for the book lovers. I am your host. Well, host is maybe a bit of a misnomer today because it's more of a candid conversation, a probing, in-depth interview, a cunning, in like, I ran out of adjectives. Probing, investigation, in-depth.
Inquisitive? Not
I need some
really.
good verbs. Some
Yeah.
verbs. I need some verbs. Maybe our book that we discussed should have been a thesaurus. Anyways, it's Emma and Corene here. Yes, the ingenues, the people with great opinions from the podcast. Sorry, Virginia and Sadie, you're both on vacation, so we get to say whatever we want. It's just us today, Emma. How are you doing?
I'm okay. It's cold outside. It's a good day for a cozy read because it's cold and it's definitely gonna monsoon rain later. So we've got that impending. If only Virginia and Sadie were here to talk about how cozy the rain is. But yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to talk about this book that Corrine and I don't know if you want to reveal the surprise for this episode. Corrine and I actually chose to read the same book today. We're calling it Corrine and Emma Book Club. So instead of hearing about multiple book recommendations, y'all just get one, but there's going to be lots of opinions involved, as you are probably well aware because of the two book friends that are here to share with you today.
Indeed. Yeah, so we decided to do something a little bit special because Virginia and Sadie are on vacation enjoying the rain or whatever it is they do, like dance naked underneath the raindrops. Like, I don't know what rain people do. I assume it's enjoyable on a sensory level. Because they're not here, we decided to have our own little book club. So instead of just talking about two books or recommending two books, we both mutually agreed or dictated. I can't remember what was the first book that we were going to read, but we didn't read that book. Do you remember what it was?
It was a book that was on yours and Sadie's books we're looking forward to for fall. It was like witches and it was kind of like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer-esque demon hunting sort of thing. But I think the library copies haven't arrived yet. So we were like, we can't read that because we don't have the book to read. So we chose another similar kind of like fall vibe. And you suggested it, but I was like, sure, I'm on board. I might hate it, but we'll give it a shot.
Sometimes, with certain book friends, it's easy to find like overlapping interests. Like with Sadie, I can usually like agree with a mystery and I will occasionally read a fantasy YA book. Virginia is very tricky. We often do not agree on things, but there are certain areas that we both kind of like enjoy. And because Emma is kind of like our newest book friend, we're still kind of figuring out. But I thought that there were like elements of this book that might appeal to you. Again, I knew nothing of it beyond the cover of it. But I thought, like it's a sapphic romance. Um, you like coffee. That,
And
that
I
that's what I went off.
I do like a good cozy vibe. Like I haven't read a lot of like cozy fantasy, I would say. I don't really read a lot of high fantasy, but I like a cozy magical realism. And this book has less of the realism aspect, more of just the magical aspect. But yeah, I definitely did not hate it. And it helped that I think when you'd suggested it, my partner was currently reading it and I was like, "Oh, well, she says it's good, so I trust her judgment." Um but yeah, should we reveal the book that we read?
I feel like we should because we've been kind of dancing it around it, but I feel like we've given several good hints. It's a cozy fantasy. It is a sapphic romance. It is a book that we have a lot of copies of, which was very handy, I think, for both of us. Yeah, I think we both have a copy of it. So we chose to read Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. Baldry. Wait, you listened to the audiobook. How do they pronounce it?
I think it's Baldry. And the author actually reads the audiobook was interesting. I have mixed feelings about that. I really love it when an author reads their own memoir. but not every author is a good narrator. I would say this guy was not my all-time favorite audiobook narrator, but he was not unlistenable. So he did a good, decent job.
Damning praise. Yeah, so the kind of like gist of this book is like after the D&D campaign is over, and they've like retired from adventuring, what did they do? Well, apparently they open a coffee shop. So our main character is Viv, and she is an orc, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Yes, she is our green friend on the cover, and she's kind of like barbarian class, if you want to kind of delve into D&D terms. So she's a fighter, but she's kind of like over it. And has recently become kind of like obsessed with this new gnomish invention, and their new drink, which is coffee. And so she decides to have kind of like one last adventure, take her spoils, and open a coffee shop in a quaint little fantasy town. And then it's all of the like ups and downs of being a small business owner. And then she kind of finds a really cute employee. I don't know. Emma, you want to take over from there?
Yeah, so Viv arrives in this city. She's decided this is the right place to open her coffee shop. We are not given kind of any insight as to why she chose this place. We do know that there are some kind of sketchy folks that walk around this place and there's kind of like I would call them like mob bosses. There's people who like visit her coffee shop and demand that she owes them
It's a
money for
mafia
like
exploitation.
yeah, for like existing there. So we got a little bit of that happening. But she befriend so I don't play D&D, so I don't know if all of these like species of characters are D&D characters. So what is a hob? Because she befriends a hob who's like a carpenter who helps her build the coffee shop, build the tables and the bar and everything. So
So if I had to take like a stab at it, a hob is a halfling, which is a copyright free way to say a hobbit. So Hobbit, but Hobbit, I believe, is owned by the Tolkien estate. So it's a hob, or in D&D class, it's like a halfling.
so I would like a tiny carpenter, sort of. Yeah. So she befriends this hob. She kind of finds him on the docks and watches him work, and she's like, "That guy's good at his job. I want to employ him." Which is an interesting way to recruit employees. But she gets this guy. His name is Cal, short for Calamity, to help her build her coffee shop and they just kind of vibe. They just kind of hang out. Um, Eventually, once the shop is built, she decides that she needs someone to help her run it. So she puts up a job posting for an assistant, where she then meets Tandri, who's this nice pink character on the cover here. Tandri has great taste in sweaters, and she is a succubus. Now, Corene, do you want to add anything about Tandri? I like her. I think she's snarky.
I think actually Tandri was maybe my favorite character of the entire thing. Tandri is a succubus, and so like in the magical world, there is like discrimination against different species, and people have certain expectations of her because she is a succubus. But she decides to kind of take the coffee shop in hand due to like marketing and chalkboards. And then they still slowly start to collect like a little group of customers and regulars and build the company. But you know, there's always trouble being a small business owner, including the magical mob that you have to solve. And you know, when people want coffee, then they also kind of want a sweet treat. And so if you need a sweet treat, then you need a rat person. And if you need a rat person, your rat person is going to make cinnamon buns. So, and biscotti. It took me like a really long time to realize they were talking about biscotti, which like
Were
shame
those
shame to me.
biscotti the whole time? The
Yes.
little thimble things? I had no idea.
See, we're already learning. We're already learning on this episode. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so the little rat whose name I did not catch, uh
Thimble.
Thimble,
Thimble.
Thimble, okay, invents like cinnamon buns and biscotti. Like Good on you. And then, as the bad things are coming, she needs to kind of call back her own crew to give her a hand, but she's also grappling with like the fact that she's retired. It's very like Lethal Weapon. It's like, no, I'm retired. I can't get back into the game. You can't drag me into the game. Once I pick up that sword and start like slaying people, then I won't be able to stop. There's conflict. I guess.
I don't fully understand the like so there's literally like there's these mafia people who are like harassing her, who are demanding money from her. And then I would say that the main antagonist, because she actually like when she eventually goes and meets up with the mafia boss and is like, hey, so I don't actually want to pay you. The mafia boss is like, that's fine. You can pay me in cinnamon buns instead. And that conflict is resolved like two-thirds of the way through the book without anything actually happening. Sorry about the spoilers. But it was just like, okay, what was the point of like building up this villain? I don't fully understand. And so the actual villain of the story, if you could call him a villain, if there really
Would
is an
we?
antagonist,
Would we?
hmm, maybe. But the villain's a bit of a stretch. But the actual villain of the story is one of Viv's former comrades from her D&D party, I would call it.
Her
Um,
adventuring party. Her
her
adventuring party.
adventuring party.
Yeah.
One of her comrades who I don't know if he's necessarily jealous of her success or if he just wants this like kind of prize that she got from their last adventure, but he starts
Who
showing up
can
and harass.
say?
He starts showing up and harassing her, and that's kind of real where the real conflict ensues, if you could call it that.
The real enemy is the friends that we made along the way. Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna put like a blanket spoilers for this entire book as we're just gonna like get into it. Hmm. And I think that like Emma, you kind of alluded to, and we're both like gently dancing around the fact that I don't know that there is conflict in this book. On the surface of it, there is conflict, and I'm like, okay, yeah, the mob should be, that is an antagonist. And then it turns out it actually isn't, because any member of the mob can be bought off by cinnamon buns, which, okay, full disclosure, I hate cinnamon buns. I find them too sweet. I find them cloying. I find them disgusting. And so the idea that the mob would be bought off by cinnamon buns is absolutely ludicrous to me.
I have complicated feelings about cinnamon buns and I apologize, Virginia, because I know you're gonna have to listen to this to edit it. And Virginia is sort of, I would call her our resident cinnamon bun lover. We have bonded over kind of sharing our favorite cinnamon bun shop in Vancouver is this place called Grounds for Coffee. You should go. Super good. Listeners, you should go too. But
Are
but
we getting paid? Is this like a paid sponsored
shameless
episode?
shameless plug for Grounds for Coffee. It is not a paid sponsorship. I just love their food and their coffee's very good. But I have what I've realized is like a hot take opinion about cinnamon buns because I like cinnamon buns, but I don't like them with icing on them. Because to me, the cinnamon bun itself, the bread and the cinnamon and the sugar, like that is sweet enough. That's a delicious sweet treat that I love to enjoy when I'm really in the mood for something giant and like will put me into cardiac arrest. But when you add the icing to it, it's that puts it overboard. That makes it too sweet. And Virginia and I have gotten into arguments about this. She thinks I am ludicrous for not liking the icing. Um, but yeah, so I do like a cinnamon bun. I'm just picky about them. But yeah, apparently every mob boss can be bought off with cinnamon buns, which to me is just a little ridiculous. Granted, in the book's defense, they do describe it as a high fantasy, low stakes adventure. So we shouldn't have expected there to be many stakes in the first place. But I want to like a book should have a little conflict. There has to be some sort of plot action going on.
Yeah. Yeah, there should. And I think like the crux of the entire conflict is supposed to be like, can Viv really put her bloodthirsty ways behind her and fully like retire into this new lifestyle? And I think that is like supposed to be the driving like big character question that goes throughout it. So all of these like fake antagonists is what I'm going to call them. Like they're just kind of like bumps along the way to kind of like test her resolve to see if she can kind of stick to this new path that she's going on for herself. Um, and yeah, maybe through reading this book, I learned more about myself and that I need more conflict. I need a little bit more conflict.
Yeah, I wouldn't say if you want my my scathing review, I wouldn't say this book has a lot of substance to it. A lot of the plot is there's just like chapters upon chapters upon chapters of them just building the coffee shop and describing like all of the carpentry that's going on. But it's not even just like regular carpentry, it's like fantasy medieval carpentry. So they're using a lot of words that I don't understand. And I'm just like, yep, yep, they're building, clicking the button through my e-reader to get through it. Um, and then once the coffee shop is built, once the coffee shop is opened, then you get chapters upon chapters of them discovering what pastries are. So it's like there's a whole chapter where they decide that like, oh my goodness, these people need food to go with their coffee. And so the little rat baker named Thimble, he's called a ratkin. I don't know what a ratkin is. I just envision a tiny rat. Um, he bakes some like a medium-sized rat.
I think he's like a a large rat,
A
like little
person
rat
sized,
person.
a small person sized rat. Um, but he bakes some cinnamon buns and they're like, what is this delicacy? And he's just like, he doesn't really talk, he just kind of motions. And so they start to sell cinnamon buns. And then later on, they need another pastry. So he invents biscotti and they're like, what is this delicacy? So there's like, it's quite repetitive. There's a lot of just like Thimble introducing them to a pastry and then like you every single time they add a new thing to the menu you get a whole bit where they write it on the menu and then you have to read through the whole new menu and it's just like we get it, you're building a coffee shop. But it's kind of
I mean,
repetitive.
it is what it promises it to be. It is literally about,
Yeah.
like opening a fantasy coffee shop. It is so funny that you mentioned the construction because I was like, this is like watching someone play The Sims. And that they're like constructing all of these things, and then like the little thing pops up saying, "Now you need a pastry." Oh, well, I have to go to my menu and like da 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 da. Like it, and not in a bad way. Like I think for people who really like enjoy that kind of detail, like there's this whole like movement in film and in books about like ladies opening a small business, like and in Hallmark, so it's like I'm opening a cupcake shop, which just sounds like horrible. But that's very big, or like ladies opening like a bookstore or a knitting store or whatever. Like the nitty gritty of being a small business owner and like the fantasy of having ownership over your position within capitalism, and that it can be cozy and rewarding. That is kind of like a very interesting trope, I think, in literature and in film and everything else. And so I think if you enjoy that kind of thing, like that really works in that book because she has unlimited resources. And so it feels very satisfying when she's like shopping for antique furniture. And I'm like, this feels like work. And I really do feel like Viv should have done a lot more market research, and that made me so angry.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's a lot of just her shopping. Something that I would like going back to the conflict conversation, something that was kind of frustrating is like she succeeds at everything. And that could be so we kind of skipped over this bit at the beginning. So in I don't know if it's a prologue or if it's chapter one, but you kind of get a glimpse of Viv's last adventure before she goes to the city to open the coffee shop. And she slays this monster called the Skalvert Queen. And inside that monster has a stone called the Skalvert Stone that she rips out of its body, and gross, and takes it to the coffee shop. She kind of buries it underneath one of the floorboards. And this Skalvert Stone is supposed to bring her good luck or good fortune or something or the other. So the whole time she's having all these successes, we're like, oh my God, I just happened to find all of this beautiful antique furniture. Now we found art on the wall and this lovely assistant who happens to be a succubus that I'm falling in love with. And like she's having all of this. Everybody loves the coffee. None of these customers don't like the coffee. None of them have ever had coffee before, and they all become obsessed with it. And it's just like this, it's not realistic. It's not realistic at all. And like granted, did I expect it to be realistic because it's an orc opening a coffee shop? No. But like everything is a success story, and it's a little bit too like kind of and then everything was fine at the end for my taste personally. It's a little too cheery. I would have liked a bit more like a few more bumps along the road.
I do think that's a super fair assessment. Like there is this kind of magical MacGuffin which is supposedly like helping her on her quest. And I thought it was gonna delve into like she gets obsessed with this. I don't even know what to call it, like a rock or like squishy pit that was inside of this creature's head that she rips out in the first chapter. I was like, oh, okay. Which I was cool with. But that she was gonna become obsessed with that and then like have a little bit more self-doubt about herself. And that was kind of the journey that she's relying too much on this kind of perceived magical item that's kind of solving all of her problems for her. And then discovers that, she had the power within the whole time, which I guess she kind of did. Um, yeah. Are we just like bitter?
We could just be bitter. I think you and I both like a little bit more like darkness a little bit. I at least do. Speaking for myself, I like a little bit more darkness. I don't mind a sad story. I don't mind a story where the characters have to struggle quite a bit. And so I think like this isn't a book that I would have regularly picked up. Like I picked it up because we were going to read it for the episode. But it's just a little bit too like, and then everything was great and we lived happily ever after at the end. And that's not usually my style. So I might have a lot of critiques about it. Like I do like a book where there's not a lot of plot to it, but it has to be like really fascinating. I like a kind of a dark psychological journey in the book where there's not a lot of like narrative plot, but you get into like the psyche of the characters. And you don't have that in this. Like you don't get it, you get a little bit into Viv's psyche where she's got this like a little bit of insecurity, a little bit of self-doubt about whether or not she can be successful as a coffee shop owner or whether she is just destined to be like a barbarian. You do get a little bit of that, but then like she kind of immediately gets over it because all of her friends are like, "No, you're great at your job. You don't need the sword. You're amazing." And she's like, "I am amazing." And like it's just like it's definitely some people's type, but it's not my type of story.
I think like you're really like nailing the for me what was one of like the big questions that I feel like wasn't answered is like why does she want to open a coffee shop anyways? Like what do you want out of it? If you just wanted to like drink coffee, like no disrespect, go for it. But like what about the ownership of this business and selling coffee to people was appealing to you because she seems constantly surprised that people are coming to the store, even though she needs them to come to the store to like pay bills. But like, she doesn't have a vision about what she wants to achieve with the store, which seems strange. Like if someone is going to give everything up to kind of like hang up your sword to say like she tromps off from her friends and adventuring parties, just like grabs that weird gooey stone out of the monster's like brain and then walks away without a single word to anyone. So if if this goal was so important to you that you would ditch all of your coworkers without a single word and not even a goodbye, like then you have to have like this burning desire to open a coffee shop. But I don't understand why you want to open the coffee shop and I don't know what you want to achieve by doing it.
Yeah, to me it seems like she tried coffee. She went so coffee is like a gnomish invention in this story. Apparently everything that's high tech is gnomish. I don't know if the gnomes are supposed to be some like super advanced society. Um, but yeah, I don't know enough about like gnome lore to be able to answer that. Um, I don't know if you have a comment about gnome lore.
It's D&D accurate. They're like tinkerers.
Because the only gnome lore that I've got is from TJ Klune's House in the Cerulean Sea book, where the gnome is just like a gardener. That's kind of like gnomes are very, very good gardeners, and that's kind of the only bit that she's got going on. But I digress. I think like the vibe that I got from Viv's like motivations to open the coffee shop was that she wanted to like she tried coffee, she really loved it. And she specifically wanted to open a coffee shop in a city where coffee didn't exist already. Like she didn't go to the gnomish city to open a coffee shop because there were coffee shops there. So she went to this other place to introduce these people to this lovely delicacy that is coffee. So like the vibe that I got was she wanted to like introduce coffee to people and like build community and find like camaraderie in it. But at the
Did
same
she? Did she? Did she? Citation needed.
She didn't say this explicitly. This is just like the energy that I got. But at the same time, you said earlier that like every time a customer walks into the shop, she's so surprised. And anytime like one of her friends decides to stick around and help her out, she's like, "What? What? Me? But I kill people." So like my impression was that she wants to build community, but at the same time, she's like so shocked that people keep coming back to this coffee shop. So it's like I don't really know what Viv's expectations were. And it's not like she needs the money to pay the bills because what bills is she paying? She bought the building and she's not paying the mob boss because she's paying her in cinnamon rolls. So, like, the only money she needs is the money to buy the goods to keep the coffee shop open. So,
And
yeah.
there's that overhead, right? Like you need to buy the like she's importing coffee, which I can't imagine is cheap, as well as the milk and like inventing freezers or something. I gnomish technology like you do.
They invented ice. Because one of the customers didn't like hot drinks. And oh, that was actually, as someone who worked at coffee shops for a long time, that was a bit that I thought was funny was a local university student kept coming to the coffee shop and just like looking around and then sitting at a table and spreading all of his books out and studying. And Viv would go up to him and be like, "Can I help you with something?" Because he wouldn't buy anything. And then he would just go, "No, I'm good." And he would keep using the space as a study space without actually being a patron of the cafe, which, like, as a former barista, it's a very real problem where people just come and hang out. And it's like, this is not the library. You can't just come in and not buy anything. Um, so there were like, as far as conflict goes, there were like very real coffee shop related conflicts where like a customer is coming in and not buying anything. That's about it. And so the ratkin, the little baker guy, he invented ice so that they could make iced lattes so that this guy now could buy something. And oh my gosh, now they've turned him around and now he likes coffee. And even at the end, it's cold out, so he buys a hot coffee and they're like, oh, Viv is changing lives with lattes, sort of.
You know, as someone who doesn't like hot coffee but really enjoys an iced Americano, I did honestly appreciate that invention a lot.
I thought of you when I read that.
Yeah, I was well pleased by that. Yeah, this is such an interesting book in that, as you say, it's like I'm it's all about kind of building community without wanting to build community. Um, but I think that there are other authors who have done this so much more successfully that this is kind of cribbing off of. I don't know if you've read any Terry Pratchett. Um,
I haven't, but I have a really good friend from when I was at UBC, who's like obsessed with what's the big sci-fi series that he has?
Sci-fi or fantasy?
Maybe it's fantasy, but I
Discworld.
that's it. That's it. So like I haven't read any of them, but my friend Hannah is obsessed with them, so I've heard much about it.
Yeah, so this I feel like is a variation on what Terry Pratchett has done. Probably he did it best in going postal, which is kind of like the fantasy equivalent of setting up the postal service, which you wouldn't think on the surface is a compelling narrative. Yeah, but actually turns out to be genuinely so moving and so wonderful and so beautiful. And it really is this that one's maybe like a little bit more purposeful in that it is a kind of like unredeemable trickster conniving con man who is forced to invent the postal system or like go to jail and be killed, and ends up reluctantly building a community around him of, you know, a ragtaggle bunch of people. It's very found family. But it's also about like fighting the man. Um, and fighting against capitalism, because it's Terry Pratchett and that's what he does. And I think he does that so successfully. I think Terry Pratchett is one of the best writers, one of the best modern writers, who maybe doesn't always get his props because he's writing in fantasy. But he is genuinely one of the most clever writers that I have ever encountered. And he does things like this, usually to make some sort of commentary, some bigger commentary about something else. And I feel like this kind of has that, but kind of lacks, to choose like a 19th century term, like lacks bottom. It lacks depth to it, in that it's not really, I feel it, I don't really feel like it's saying anything about anything.
Yeah, like I haven't read Terry Pratchett, so I can't comment on that. But I would say that this has like the potential to say something about that. Like it has the potential to be a commentary on capitalism or on like, I don't know, mob bosses controlling cities. But there's no like, but it doesn't execute it. There's no like you said, there's no proper depth to it. Like it very much could have done that, but it's very like surface level. And even as far as like the found family community aspect of it goes, like I really liked Tandri as a character, but a lot of the other characters that become a part of this found family are quite surface level. Like we don't really get much from Hob, the or from the Hob, his name is Cal, from Cal, aside from just like he builds stuff, he shows up and like instead of saying nice things, he just goes, but like Viv assumes that that means he likes her. We meet this musician who is like kind of shy at first and then comes out of his shell and then he helps them build the shop when they need construction stuff done and but like you don't learn anything about these characters. And so I can't really call it a found family because like where is the family aspect? Where is the emotional connection between these people? But with the exception of Viv and Tandri. But other than them, like they weren't really giving me much.
Well, it's because they're not allowed to develop outside. It's only their connection to Viv, right? And what they can help her with. So you don't feel like they have their own lives and wants and goals outside of what they can service to her. And so they end up feeling really flat, because they're just like what they can contribute to Viv's business. Gosh, we sound negative.
The writing was pretty good. I wouldn't say it was the most phenomenal book I've ever read. Everything comes with a negative. But the right, because like with books like this, it's like if the plot doesn't sell me, but the writing is really, really fantastic, then I can still get into it. If the plot doesn't sell me and then the writing is pretty mediocre, or even if the plot does sell me and then the writing is really mediocre, then I just like I can't finish the book. Um, so like I would say that the plot or the writing itself was good. There was nothing that bothered me about the writing, but a lot of it was just kind of exposition writing though. So, um, yeah.
It's really tough when you read a book like this, or when we're talking about a book like this for the podcast, is like, am I judging it on the criteria of what the book is trying to be or what I wanted the book to be? And I feel like in many ways, this is a me as a reader thing, in that I wanted something from the book that was not the purpose of this book. This book is very straightforward about what it is. And, it's turn your brain off, don't worry about it, take a break, open a coffee shop, make your little characters do their things. Everything's going to be okay. And I wanted things to not be okay.
I tend to prefer books where things are not okay. And so like this, if your expectations are, I just want to read something that's light and cozy and easy and not a lot of conflict and like a lovely, there's a lot. So if you like sapphic pining, I wouldn't necessarily call this book a romance, but there definitely is a lot of pining that happens throughout it. And so if you want something that's got that kind of like light and fluffy, cozy vibe, like this would have absolutely fit our cozy episode, I think unless we were leaning towards magical realism and not just straight up fantasy. But if you like, this is definitely a good like fall vibe book if you want to just like cozy up with a fluffy blanket and a warm cup of coffee. And if you're like me and have cats with a cat on your lap, if you like that kind of vibe, then like this is a book that I think you would enjoy. My partner really liked it, but she tends to prefer those like kind of cozy romance, like lighter, fluffy books than I do. Um, so she really liked it, but it just, I don't think it was what I was looking for. I don't think it's something that I would have normally been drawn to.
I, I do like a little bit of coziness. Um, but I like a little coziness with an edge. And that's what I think. I wouldn't necessarily call Terry Pratchett cozy, or kind of like in the same line like TJ Klune. It's like on the surface of it, this seems very sweet and very simple, but it's always has part of what makes a cozy book really successful, I think, is that it's choosing to be cozy and soft and gentle in a world that is dark and cold and uncaring. And I think that when it's successful, you acknowledge the kind of injustices and unfairness of the world and harshness of the world. And yet your characters choose to be gentle with each other because of that. And I think that that kind of messaging is what makes a successful book of that genre for me. It's not necessarily that the world is a light and easy place. It's that people are choosing to be gentle with each other because they know that.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that's exactly how I would describe like the TJ Klune books, The House in the Cerulean Sea series, is like they choose kindness, they choose to be cozy with one another, they choose to be compassionate with one another, but the overall like society is very oppressive and these people are very much discriminated against and there is a lot of conflict that comes from that. Or like as far as cozy magical books go, like I really loved Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and sure, it's like it's light, it's fluffy, it makes you feel really happy at the end, but it also like really, really tugs on your heartstrings and like shows you kind of the traumas that these people have dealt with and the like the problems in their lives and their like emotional relationships with people that they want to solve. Like it really kind of highlights those while having a positive message at the end. And I like that kind of stuff. Like I like a cozy, happy book that'll make me sob throughout it. Yeah. And this didn't have that. It was just like we build the shop, we make the pastries. We build the shop, we make the pastries. We invent ice, we make more pastries. Like, but it didn't have that kind of like emotional draw that I'm looking for in my cozy fantasy or my cozy magical realism.
You do really want that like catharsis moment, right? Like I think another author who does it particularly well is Becky Chambers. Yeah, and she primarily does sci-fi stories, kind of like the same idea as like a found family, right? Of people coming from kind of different walks of life and they've got their own histories and their own baggage that they're bringing, and yet they're like despite everything choosing that compassion or like the kind option or curiosity instead of like prejudice when it comes to different things. And her books are like there's a little bit of melancholy. I think that makes a cozy book really good. Like a sadness and acknowledgement of the sadness of their past. That just makes there's always that moment in it where there's like that big revelation, or the characters, if it's a romance thing, it's like when they finally acknowledge their feelings together and they like they decide to get together, and that swelling of emotion, that kind of like catharsis of that really, really, really works.
Yeah, I haven't read Becky Chambers, but I have a friend that's been really into her right now, so I keep seeing her pop up on my radar. So I'll definitely I think we have a like futuristic robot-y episode coming up in the future, so I'll keep her on the back burner for that. So I'm glad that you brought up the romance because you are kind of our resident romance expert, and I want to know what your opinion was of the romance in this book.
I'm going to preface this by saying that, again, this book was a nominee for the Reader's Favorite Fantasy of 2022, so the Goodreads Choice Awards. It was a Hugo Award nominee for Best Novel, Nebula Award nominee for Best Novel, Locus Award nominee for Best First Novel, Audie Award nominee for Fantasy, a bunch of awards. So it doesn't need our help. It doesn't need our help. There are lots of people who love this book, and I'm happy for them because I totally understand why they love it. I can absolutely see the appeal for it, and this is no shade to anyone who really enjoyed it. Which which is why I feel like happy. Usually, like on the podcast, unless I really hated something, like we don't like straight out say we hated something. Usually, just like I didn't care for it, it wasn't for me. And so I'm going to put that aside, like that there are lots of people who love this and connected to this. And then I'm going to put on my own hat as a reader and as a romance reader and talk about the romance and say that I hated it. I hated it so much. I did not care for that at all. At all. I love a coffee shop AU. It's like one of the like tropes that I love. I enjoy. I think working in a coffee shop would be real tough. As I'm sure you know, Emma, like it's not an easy job, and customers flirting with you or like dating your own coworkers is a horrible idea. Um, However, in fiction, I'm 100% in support of it. Yeah, absolutely. You should date your coffee shop boss. No worries. It'll turn out great. Um, yeah, yeah, date your barista. Totally fine. In fiction, in fiction. So I was like ready to be fully on board with this. I, I didn't, I didn't think there was a single spark between them. Not a single like moment of heat or like attraction or like nothing. Like they might as well have been aunts, just aunts, like practical magic aunts in the coffee shop.
Yeah. I mean, as you guys all know, I do love a pining sapphic romance. I love a slow burn. I love like a long pining slow burn. I typically eat that stuff up. But I think there was one scene where they went on a picnic together, and I could like kind of feel a little bit of potential tension during that. But other than that, like to mark, I don't know if they have explicitly marketed this book as a romance. I think people just like describe it as a romance because there is a romance in it, sort of. But like huh?
The cover says romance. This is a romance cover. It's romantasy, Virginia and Sadie's favorite word.
So to market this as a romantasy, I really, like you said, I really did not feel a lot of romance throughout it. For we said before that this is going to be a spoiler-filled episode. Near the end of the book, there's a moment where like they're kind of something dark and emotional happens and they're kind of holding each other and they kiss quickly, but then it like moves on past that. There's no like build up to the kiss. There's no like, oh, I really want to kiss Tangerine. Oh, I'm so attracted to her. Like there's none of that. It's just like they kiss and then they're gone. And then in the next scene and in all of the scenes to follow it from, and this happens close to the end of the book, and all the scenes from there to the end of the book, there is no more romantic tension between the two of them. Like one kind of cryptic and prophetic gnome says that it kind of implies that they might get married because he's like, "Oh, congratulations," and Viv is like, "What?" and that's it. Um, so like there's a little bit of that happening, but other than that, like there is no real like emotional and romantic connection between these two. I think they make good friends. I think they have a very like deep and emotional platonic relationship. We do get a cute little one bed trope scene in the middle where like Chandri is worried about Viv's safety, so she offers to stay over with Viv overnight, which is a little ridiculous because Viv is an orc who can definitely defend herself. Um, and it's like, oh, they have to cuddle together on Viv's one bedroll and they can feel their backs touching. And but there's no like there's no romantic chemistry between them. So I didn't buy it. And I thought it was boring and a little bit pointless.
Tepid. Absolutely tepid. And like when I'm reading my romance, when they finally kiss, you're like, yes, yes, make out. This has been like a simmering pot on the stove for hours, and it's finally coming to a boil. Yes. When they finally kissed, I was like, are you sure? Are you sure that's are you're not like confusing your feelings of like business partnership or just like this person happens to be around a lot, so I guess I should marry them? Like, because there is no spark of attraction between them whatsoever. Like you really nailed it. Like it feels so platonic. So platonic. Like they're really good business partners and they like really respect each other and they have a really good partnership in the business. But in terms of like romance, like I don't want them to make out. And that makes me feel bad. Like everyone should make out who wants to make out. That's totally fine. But the two of them, I was like, oh, I don't, I hate coming to a romance. And I'm like, oh, I don't. I don't think you two should be together, actually. This is not gonna work out.
Yeah, and as a woman who dates women, I think there's a problem in like the sapphic community where people are like, "Oh, this girl is nice to me. Is she my friend or do I want to date her?" Like this, it's a huge kind of like kerfuffle that people have to go through. And I feel like so often people will be like, "I have a crush on this girl just because she's nice to her," or be like, "I have a crush on her. I want to date her just because they have good banter or they have a good platonic friendship." Um, and I can kind of feel that same energy in this, where it's like just because you are both sapphics existing in the same space does not mean that you need to date and does not mean that you are romantically compatible. Um, yeah, I think Travis Baldree is a good cozy writer, a good fantasy writer. I would not call him a good romance writer because I did not buy into it.
No, there's just like no build to it. And I think it's because there's that very focus on like the practical steps that you need to take to open a coffee shop business that like a really good romance writer would build in that tension in each of those events, right? And I think like there's an attempt made to it, but because there's no tension between them, really. There's no conflict between them. There's no kind of like simmering point of tension. It's just like, well, I respect you and you respect me. Yes, we both respect each other. Which great. Like building something on a foundation of respect is integral, but you gotta like just like the cinnamon bun, you gotta put a little bit of icing on top just to like make it interesting. And there is little to no tension because there's nothing really getting in the way of them getting together. Like there's no other than the fact that Viv is, her boss, which should be more of a point of contention and yet is not. Like there's no reason why they can't hook up, but they just don't because
Long dramatic pause. And big spoiler for the very, very, very end of the book. There's even that moment where the coffee shop burns down. They have to rebuild the coffee shop. Viv builds a second bedroom upstairs, implied for Tandri. So it's like, okay, now that you guys have kissed, now that you guys are going to be together, we assume that you can sleep in the same bed, because that's what people who date do. But no, they're going to be roommates. They're going to be roommates. That's what really got me. It's like if you want this person to be your romantic partner in addition to your business partner, then you should at least like sleep next to each other in the same bed, not in separate rooms. So yeah.
or have a conversation of like, hey, you want to move in? I don't know. And maybe make out a little bit and then like ask rather than building a whole bedroom for them.
Yeah, they had like one chaste kiss and then Viv built Tangeria a bedroom without asking first. It was pretty much what happened.
Wish, I mean, I wish it was that easy to get real estate, but like it's not. It's not. So yeah, it's a very strange progression of their romance as well, because as you say, there's one kind of little cute little peck, and then we're moving in together. But in separate bedrooms. I love Lucy style. So it's yeah, it in terms of like a romance, I think it doesn't work. I just don't think it works. And I wanted to cheer for them. I wanted them to like have that good romantic tension, but it's just not there. It's just not there.
Yeah. So that is our honest and scathing review of Legends and Lattes. Did we want to do an existential question today?
I feel like our existential question is like this book.
Yeah. And so before we recorded, Corene suggested doing like we could kind of recommend other cozy fantasy reads, other kind of like similar reads to Legends and Lattes, if you're into this kind of vibe. But I think we kind of did that. especially when we got into our like critique of the writing and you started going through like, here's a bunch of authors that did the style better. So if you like this, but you want to read something that might be a little better, Corrine mentioned Terry Pratchett and Becky Chambers. I really love Before the Coffee Gets Cold. You could just listen to our entire Cozy Fantasy episode we did a little bit ago and get all our suggestions there. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add as far as book recommendations.
No, it's very funny. And I'm going through like a very fast Goodreads list of like cozy fantasy. Funnily enough, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies that I talked about 2 weeks ago is on this. We mentioned TJ Klune. Yeah, it's one of those genres which is kind of having, I guess, a moment right now. I would say this kind of like gentler fantasy romance sci-fi thing. A book that I saw pop up quite a bit was the graphic novel by Kay O'Neill, The Tea Dragon Society.
I love
Uh,
those books. And
yeah.
I would say anything by Kay O'Neill, Tea Dragon Society, The Moth Keeper, they're all very much that like kind of cozy fantasy vibe. In this good read list of similar reads, I'm also seeing The Adventures of Amina al-Safari, which I think is the book that Sadie did for the Star Signs episode. Um, so I think it's kind of going off of that, like, oh, if you like a fun high fantasy adventure, even though there's not adventure in this one, unless you count the first chapter, um, then that book could be another suggested read. But yeah, Becky Chambers is appearing on this. Trust of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson is another book that we're seeing as a similar read. So yeah,
T.
if you want another,
Kingfisher. Yeah. T. Kingfisher is really great. Actually, all of T. Kingfisher's many, many pseudonyms are all great. Yeah, they do horror as well as kids' books. So they're Ursula Vernon. All of their stuff is very, very cozy and again, like succeeds on multiple levels in that it is a very sweet, charming story, but is actually saying something pretty profound. There's another graphic novel, Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker, which was very cute, very sweet. Same idea, magical bakery. Everyone's doing a lot of like cooked goods. Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones shows up a lot, and that's one of my favorite books of all time, which I think is absolutely lovely. So yeah, there's a lot out there. I think that it's definitely a genre that we're going to see a lot more of, which I think is great. Yeah, I think it. Oh yeah, Shauna McGuire is the one who kind of like brought this book to prominence, so we should give a shout out to them. Their book, The Children of the it's a book of very short novellas about like magical children when they get booted out of their magical world and can't quite reintegrate back into society. That series is kind of like not very cozy actually. But she is Shauna McGuire is a very well respected fantasy writer, and they kind of promoted this book, and then it started to kind of like take off, which I think is wonderful. Like writers supporting other writers, and this is Travis Baldry's first book, which I think is really cool for like a debut author to kind of get a lot of renown. Yeah, I think it's just again, it's one of those situations where this is just not the book for us as readers. And it's not to say that a book is bad. And that's kind of like the wonderful thing about books is that what for me is not hugely satisfying as a read, for someone else is really like scratching an itch, which I think is lovely. And kind of as Emma has been saying, like it is, you don't need to think too hard. It's very sweet. It's very cozy. Not much happens. Don't worry about it. Do you like watching people play The Sims? Then you got this. Or like, what is it? Roller coaster builder? Sorry.
Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Yeah. If you like Roller Coaster Tycoon, but like with a coffee shop, then this is absolutely the book for you.
Awesome. Well, I think we kind of covered it all. Any last things you want to add, or shall we sign off for today?
I always feel bad when I don't like a book. I always feel bad when I like a book. And we spent, and have forced all of you to listen to kind of like our hot takes on it. But I think if like it's a parting word, it's like it's whatever works for you. Every reader
Yeah.
is unique. Every reader brings something unique to the book that they're reading. And what sometimes if, someone doesn't love a thing that I deeply love, I feel a little bit hurt, but that's okay. That's everyone's opinion and you're kind of bringing your own life and your own experience to whatever media you let into your life. So like if you love this book, I'm glad. I'm glad that you did. I can see why you would like it. It's gentle and soft and cozy. And as Emma said, like it's a perfect book to kind of cuddle up with. And sometimes you just need that. You just need to shut off this brain. Um, so yeah, like find comfort wherever you can, people. It's a harsh world out there, even if Legends and Lattes doesn't accept that. So thank you so much, readers. Thank you, Emma. We hope that you enjoyed our little book club discussion. This is kind of fun to do one book. What did you think about it?
We should do this again.
Yeah, whenever anyone's on vacation, Corene and Emma are gonna like go a deep dive into one single book. Maybe we'll choose a different genre this time. Maybe we should go through like all the top hits of book talk. Yes, a real
Uh,
challenge.
that sounds scary.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, happy reading, everyone, and enjoy a very cozy fall. Bye bye.